Hi everyone, I'm Sean from ButcherBox Singapore. ButcherBox stocks a large variety of beef roasts and steaks from producers all over Australia. Cooking a steak is a deeply personal matter and everyone cooks their steak differently, and today I'm going to show you how I cook the steak my way. Lately I've really been enjoying a nice thick cut dry aged Little Joe sirloin steak. Little Joe beef is 100% naturally raised grass-fed beef out of Victoria and is famous for carrying a marble score of 4+, which is usually only found in grain-fed Wagyu beef. Here we have a full slab of Little Joe sirloin that we've been dry aging in our facility for the last 30 days. Today I'll be cutting my steak from here. So first things first, I'm going to trim off the outside of our dry aged beef. We can't eat the outside parts. And now I'm just going to trim off the bottom parts from the dry aged. You don't have to get absolutely everything off, but just taking off a bit of the hard bits. And for sirloin, it's always nice to take off that little bit of sinew there because it's always going to be chewy. So first things first, we're going to start by seasoning our steak. I'm going to get a little bit of Olsen sea salt, sprinkle that here, and it's okay to put a little bit on the cutting board around, and then when you can roll it around the cutting board, you can always get the edges. Flip it over, and another little sprinkle on the other side. And there we have it, nicely salted. The pepper will come back to after the cooking is done, because I don't like to put on pepper at the start, because when you cook it, you burn the pepper. First, we're going to start by getting our pan to a medium to high heat. When I'm cooking a sirloin steak, I always like to place it fat side down, and it will start to render the fat out of the steak, and then you can use that to cook it. Then you can save money on cooking oil as well. So I'm going to leave that steak there for about 1.5 minutes, and that's going to absolutely render down and make that fat nice and crispy. And especially on a steak like this, which has been dry aged, that fat is super flavorful. And cooking the steak in that fat will make the dry aged flavour come right out into that beef. Okay, so now I'm just going to push down the steak a bit on the edges so we don't miss out on crisping those edges up. So you can see here we're starting to get a lot more fat rendered out, and over here in the pan there's a lot of fat in the pan, all natural. This is how you save money on cooking oil and amplify your cooking process. Okay, so I've been cooking this for about 1.5 minutes on the fat, and as you can see, it's getting nice and crispy. If you don't do this, when you cook it in from the edges, you'll be looking for a medium rare on the inside, which means your fat's going to be medium rare as well, and we don't want that. You don't want cold fat, you want it nice and crispy. So now we're just going to push a bit of the natural fat around the pan, and then we're going to turn this steak on its side. And as you can see, we've got plenty of fat around the pan, we've got nice crispy fat, and a lot of that salt has absorbed into the steak already. I don't like to move my steak around too much when it's cooking, because if you break the surface area, you will lose a bit of that Maillard reaction, they call it, on the side of the steak. Now, this steak being dry aged, it's going to cook a lot faster than other steaks, so we're just going to reduce our cooking time. I'm going to look and take a bit of a guess here and think about 1.5 minutes on each side, bearing in mind that there's a lot of heat that's come into that steak from cooking it on the fat already. So we're nearly ready to turn this steak over now. So I'm just gonna move a bit of the oil around the pan to get a nice even coating, and then we're gonna flip it over. So as you can see, by not moving my steak around when I'm cooking it, you can see that it's got a really great crust on there. Sometimes the steak will start to curl up a little bit on the edges, which means you will lose a bit of surface. So you just tap your tongs down a bit there and make sure that you're getting that. All right, so I'm just going to check the internal temperature of my steak now. We're sitting at about 30 degrees, so we're not quite there yet. I'm going to be looking for an internal temperature of about 46 to 47 degrees Celsius, sorry. And then once that's done resting, it'll land at around about 53 to 54, which is a nice medium rare internally. Having a thermometer like this gives you a huge advantage to cooking your steaks. You can always make sure that you don't overcook your steaks with a thermometer and checking the internal temperature of the beef. So now I think we're done, so I'm just going to go ahead and take the steak out and rest it for at least half the time that I cooked it for. Okay, so now that it's all sliced up, ready to serve, we've exposed the interior of the steak, and now I like to just a light season across that there with our salt, and now is when I bring the pepper in. Just a light seasoning of pepper across, and that is ready to go. And there we have it, a dry aged Little Joe sirloin steak, topped in our Bowmasters red wine jus. Super simple and tasty. Make sure to drop in the Butcher Box at 414 Dewchat Road to get more advice, tips and tricks on how to get the most out of your meat.